Y'all know what it is.
Bang ding ding, trademark. He come out 6'7" tall. Bang ding ding, one is star. Bang dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding. This is a perfect day.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Eggs. Today's special guest is CMO and CGO at Latana, Angeley Mullins. Latana is an AI-powered brand tracking solution designed to help brands make better marketing decisions. As a leading B2B startup, Angeley and the Latana team help make users worldwide understand key brand insights for both themselves and their competitors, enabling them to zoom in on the audiences that drive their business. For the last 18 plus years, Angeley has worked with companies from all over the world. Her experience spans everything from high-growth startups to large-scale corporations and NGOs. She has been successful in partnering with CEOs, founders, investors, and more in growing their companies into well-established market leaders, in addition to helping them expand into international markets. Joining us today for a conversation about brand tracking, what it is and how we can leverage it in our own businesses, scaling a startup, how to raise money for future growth, and business leadership, how the role of CMO has evolved over the years. Please join us in welcoming to the show the incredible Angeley Mullins. Hi, Angeley. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Nice to be here.
We're so happy to have you. Thanks so much for making the time. And as we discovered just before the call, you're located in Berlin, Germany. And so I really appreciate you spending your evening with us.
Of course. Pleasure.
So cool. So I guess let's just kind of start at the beginning a little bit. I mean, obviously you have a really exciting history in, not just technology companies in general and SaaS and all that good stuff, but you've really come through the ranks of working for a number of pretty high powered, tech companies. So can we talk a little bit about just sort of your early days and how you got into this world?
Sure. So dialing way back in the Wayback Machine, I first started actually running sales teams, started out as an account executive doing sales for finance companies, and then moving into managing sales. And then one day somebody said, look, you've got so much insights and questions about marketing. Have you ever thought about marketing? And I was like, that's a great idea. You should check that out. And then it was history ever since. But I actually made the transition between core finance companies and then moving into tech, which is a really interesting transition. And my first role there was at Amazon, moving into tech, but have not looked back ever since.
Well, that's interesting because most people, are trying to get a job at Amazon and have a bunch of experience and have a hard time getting in, and being able to come in with no experience in marketing and get a job at Amazon. That's pretty impressive.
I had a lot of other experience, I will say. It's a lot of international expansion experience in sales. So definitely the role I had was actually leading all the go-to-market for a division of theirs called Amazon Global. So it's the international shipping, international expansion, cross-border trade division. So yes, but I do understand what you're saying. When I was working at Amazon, tons of people would reach out to me. How do I get in? People I'd never heard of before would be reaching out on LinkedIn, how I get in. So
just because you had Amazon in your title. Hey, you might know someone, help me out.
That's awesome. So let's talk about the transition then from there. So, I mean, obviously now you're part of Latana, and Latana is, I guess I don't totally know how old or whatever, but it's still sort of in that startup realm. I saw that you guys recently just landed a Series B funding. So that's awesome. I'd like to learn more about that. But can you talk about how to, I guess, sort of the transition from, I guess, working for people to leading people happened, like sort of that transition?
So it's an interesting transition because when you're always working for people, it's always about getting a job done. When you're leading people, it's about helping others to get a job done. It's a completely different skill set between what we call an individual contributor and then leadership at the most senior levels within an organization. Your role really comes about helping others, enabling others, making sure that there is a good atmosphere in the organization and there's a good vision, a good strategy, and people have the tools that they need to get the job done. So it's actually interesting. The higher up you go, people think you have to become more technically skilled. It's actually the other way around. You have to become more people skilled, more soft skilled, more strategic than more technical, because you hire super top technical talent. And like that quote that we all see going around LinkedIn, don't hire smart people and then tell them what to do. It's that same thing that happens when you're in a leadership role.
That's funny. I actually have a friend who's in software engineering, and he's in a leadership role now, and he kind of likes it, but he kind of doesn't at the same time because he doesn't get in and actually get his code on. So I could see how that change is applicable as you move up the scale. Can you tell us a little bit about? I can't even talk today. It's a rough day. Can you tell us about Latana? What is it? How is it function? I see that there's AI in the description, so it's got to be cool and hip, right?
Sure. So Latana, we are a brand tracking and consumer insights tool. What does that mean? We focus on helping brand marketers understand the big question: what is my brand worth? That is kind of the big elephant in the room, especially for marketeers and marketing leaders. There's so many tools out there: Google Analytics, Hootsuite social media tools, etc. So there's not a lack of tools, and there's not a lack of data. The problem is, for brand marketing, there's a lack of context behind the data.
Sure.
What does this data mean? In the past 10 years, there's been so much of data-driven marketing. We have a state now of data paralysis. People have all the data points. They don't know what it means. They don't know which ones to action on, and they don't actually know the perception that their consumers or their target audiences have about their brand. This is the important thing, because if you spend time, whether as a marketing leader or even a small business owner, building up your business, and then you make a strategic decision and you figure out, oh my gosh, I missed the mark. Usually it's because you didn't do enough, background research, usability to figure out what their perception is of your brand and your positioning.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting insight, especially if you think about sort of the early days of social media, for example, right? Everybody was hiring some 14-year-old kid that knew how to operate Twitter and this kind of thing, right? And it was just like, we're on Twitter because we need to be on Twitter. Everyone's on Twitter, or choose your platform. And so, but the strategy took a while. Like, people didn't get that, it was like, okay, well, we're on, now what? And it's kind of that way with analytics too, where basically everybody gets Google Analytics or whatever. So, okay, we have a top level view of our data, I guess, and we have some understanding of what people are doing when they come to our website, all that kind of stuff. But it is that deeper level of data, or at least understanding what you've got, that I think is the key differentiator. So I guess then that's where a product like Latana comes in, right? And how does it leverage UI to, I guess, kind of crack that code for people, or AI?
Yeah, so good question. There's a couple different things. What we have is a mobile optimized survey taking platform. So if you've ever played a video game, been shopping, been on YouTube, anything digital, and you ever got that survey come up, this is either us or one of our partners. Our surveys are opt-in. Being based in Berlin, we have the European GDPR, everything is opt-in. So we know that they are real survey takers. The idea, though, is that we are asking target audience groups, are you aware of this brand? Do you prefer it? Consider it, all the way down the brand funnel. We can even do associations. This one is super interesting for brands. We've had banks, for example, top neobanks, fintech companies saying, okay, we think this is our target audience. We think, our target audience thinks that we're progressive, we're cool, we're breaking boundaries. We ask the target audience, no, they're behind the times, stodgy. It's really interesting when you can actually ask your target audience about your brand. So this is how we go about collecting the data.
Well, it's so interesting, right? Because it's such an obvious thing, right? That you should ask people. And I think it was in one of your promotional videos, actually. But it sort of showed a video clip of, how we used to do this, right? And it was a focus group of, 1970s footage or whatever of 12 people sitting around a table raising their hand, right? But I mean, literally, we asked people back then. And there are ways of doing focus grouping and things like that nowadays, but we certainly don't think to do that with our general data collection or our general analytics tracking. And so I think that that's an interesting insight, because it's kind of, I don't know, doing the old thing, but better, right? It's like we never really moved past that, even though so many people did.
Yeah, exactly. And the one example I always love to give is, think of Old Spice. I don't know if you gentlemen happen to use that product or have friends that do.
That's my my grandpa's go-to back in the day. And
there you go.
Used it for a little bit.
There you go. So the Old Spice example. So of course, when they first started this product, they marketed it towards men. Why? For the obvious reason, it's a men's deodorant. However, as they went through on their journey, they noticed that sales were declining. And so what did they do? In the old-fashioned way, they did the focus group. They actually started asking consumers the perception, and most importantly, who buys the product? And guess who it was? Women.
Huh.
Women were the ones buying the product for whoever it was in their lives that needed it. So then they changed their marketing campaign. They changed their branding completely. And I don't know if you guys remember the Old Spice campaigns with the guy on the horse. Your man should be this, your man should be that. The moment they started doing those campaigns, their sales went through the roof.
Yeah, I believe it. That must be why they have centaurs and that one super ripped guy. Like all that stuff, right? It makes perfect sense. And I've actually even seen now there are marketing products, not just, to women as the consumer or as the buyer, but also as the consumer. There's I think a series of ads running around right now that's like a telenovela or whatever. And it's got the woman who's stealing his skincare product, because, it smells so good or whatever. It's for me too. And and so I think it's kind of interesting, because I'm just like Mike. My grandfather had that and Aqua Velva in the cabinet.
Aqua Velva.
And so those were the two. And it's funny because now not that everybody needs to know, but that's my deodorant too. And I got in years ago, but it's funny how their marketing has evolved, and they've done such a good job with the campaign. So it's interesting how those little insights about who to market to actually really revolutionize their business.
Well, and back in the day, I remember when malls were a thing and you would go to a mall and you'd walk around and look at things and buy things. I was with my mom. I was probably 8 or 9. We were shopping for something, and a focus group pulled us in to do taste comparison on like juice or something like that. And they gave us 4 or 5 different cups of juice and a survey to fill out for each one. And you got a $10 gift certificate at the end or something cheesy, but that's a real life example of how they used to do it back in the day. They'd actually pull people in at random and get feedback. When you're doing with Latana, is it all form based? Is it all survey based, or do you collect data points from other locations, such as feedback from reviews on Amazon or reviews on this or that, or are there other data points involved?
That's an interesting question. We actually don't do that. The surveys on Amazon, the Trustpilot, G2, any kind of these surveys, because there's a lot of controversy in that market of people getting paid to do these types of reviews. So what we like to do again is the opt-in survey. Our machine learning in the background takes out any fluctuations, takes out anything that looks like it's a bot. We're able to actually zone in. The example I always give, real example, we had a very well-known American pet food company. So there's not many of them, so you can take a guess. Coming to us saying, look, we have a new brand or a new flavor of our pet food coming out. We need to know what consumers, every woman of this demographic age that has a Chihuahua in New York City, what do they think? So we are zoning in, and everyone these days has a mobile device. So through personalization techniques, opting in, we're able to really get to that target audience group much faster, ask them the relevant questions. So not just what do you think of the brand, but we can ask them association questions. We can even ask them what we call custom KPIs or custom questions. Do they have an intent to purchase? How many dogs do they have? And this really gives the much richer, granular feedback. Just like the example you gave, when you were a child and you were in the mall, imagine how many questions that you can ask that a normal click form can't ask. So this is where the richness of the data comes in.
So as a user of your product, when I log in, can I create the questionnaire myself, or is this something that's we reach out to you and you design the campaign accordingly?
That's a good question. We actually have an in-house research team that will support our clients, because a lot of times our clients have an idea of what the answers are, but they don't have the concept of how to frame the answer, how to frame the questions in order to get those answers. So we have inside research support that will absolutely help with that.
Great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and I think one of the things that you guys do really well, so there's sort of, a few different buckets that your type of research is really good for, brand awareness being one, right? Trying to understand how people perceive your brand, or, like you mentioned, the association questions, this idea of, what kind of thing do you associate our brand with, and I think that those are interesting insights, right? Because they're more, I guess, colorful then do you like us or don't you? Or rate us on 1 to 10 or something like that, right? This idea of, do you think we're cool or do you think we're lame? Or do you think we're reliable or that we're not? Like these types of, I mean, it's funny because I guess when you really sit and think about it, this would be how you would ask a human, right? This would be how you would ask a person. And so many of the forms and things like that we fill out, even though they're written by humans largely, they don't feel very human. Like they're trying to solicit a response that doesn't feel very natural. And so I think that that's one thing you guys do particularly well. But I think what it lends into that I think is so interesting, and you sort of alluded to this, was the audience segmentation. And you can do some of this like with Google Analytics and other platforms, right? I mean, you can start to dig in, and Google will make some guesstimate about, how old this person is, or maybe they can tell by an IP address what country they came from or whatever. But, this is really top level generalized information, right? And so, but I think to your point about getting to the, going to their mobile device basically, and by virtue of the GDPR, is it GDPRS?
Yeah, GDPR.
Whatever it is, GDPR, by virtue of that, and by people having to actually opt in, you actually are connecting a human to your data, versus, the bots and things like that. So I think it's really interesting because I think the power, or so much of the power in digital marketing, comes down to segmentation and making sure that you're speaking to the right person in the right tone, using the right language and all that stuff. And, I mentioned to Mike right before we got on, I had a business call just before this with an IT company that does like managed IT services for people. And they're trying to increase their business and all this stuff. And I was asking them about their analytics. I was like, well, what do you know? Who are your customers? Blah, blah, blah. And they don't have any idea. They're a really established company. They've been in business 20 years. They've got great customers already, but they don't even really know who their customer is. Right. And so it's really funny how, because I think the assumption is, especially as a small business owner myself, and maybe I'm a little biased, but the idea is that like, oh, well, we should really know. But I mean, by the time we're, as big as some of these companies, God, we really should know, right? I mean, like they should somehow be better than we are, as people who maybe don't know. And but the reality is that it's not.
Mm-hmm. You're right. I mean, it's the key problem that we're solving. And especially, I would say, in the hypergrowth startup space, we get so many tech companies coming to us. There's so much pressure to get year-over-year growth. So they're focusing on things like performance marketing, quick wins. They want something to put together, quick ROI. So they go all these campaigns, they get money in, but then when you try to do longer term growth and really try to make the bigger jumps, or usually we see another catalyst is they've done well in one market, now they need to expand to another. And of course, in doing that, you get that question, like you said, who's our customer? What do they care about? And everybody has their hands, raised in the air. They don't know.
Well, and I think specifically in startup culture too, there's a real problem where, at least for the longest time, people were sort of leading with invention first, right? The product first. This was the thing that I created, and therefore I will take it to the world. And so it's sort of this model where you were building a thing, and I guess, the old, if you build it, they will come. It was the hope, right? And now because of tools like Latana, they have the option to almost flip that around a little bit, right? They may already have a product or whatever, but it may be like just what you were saying with Old Spice. Maybe their audience isn't who they think they are. They're building widget X because they think it's for audience Y, but it's actually for audience Z, and they just don't see it yet.
Yeah, you're right. We actually experienced that now that I'm in Europe. There's a difference in the philosophies. When I was living in America, it was like you said, basically, we're going to figure out if there's a market for this. They will even sell you a product that doesn't exist yet. They will sell you the concept. Does the customer want the concept? Yeah, great. We're going to go build it. In Europe, they always focus on building a product first. They completely forget about sales and marketing and product market fit, if something will actually be viable. And then we have this great product and it's perfect, and nobody wants to buy it. So it's a really interesting issue. What we find though is that a lot of companies, when it's easy to get your first couple of sales, you have family and friends, you can grow from there. But once you really have to start scaling, you need to understand who your customer is, what the associations are, what do they really want? Is there a really good fit? Is there longevity with your product or service? And it's amazing how now, in this day and age, so many companies still can't answer that question.
Yeah, this conversation kind of reminds me of, do you remember when Coke tried to rebrand or create a new Coke back in the 90s? And they put it out, and it was huge marketing campaign, huge everything, and it was just a total flop. Something like your product probably could have saved them a lot of time and effort back in the day to keep, just figure it out in advance and not go down that road. brought up 2 or 3 times in a couple books that I've read over the years, and it's as an example of what not to do. I'm sure that there's a lot of like what you just mentioned, as far as like getting feedback before you actually develop the product. If you could do like a 3D simulation, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? That seems like a really strategic way to go and actually develop a product first before actually getting into the manufacture process and get feedback before you actually have the finished product. It's really kind of a cool idea.
Yeah, we're actually doing the next era of this is not just a particular region or country, but city-based tracking.
Really?
So we have a lot of companies now, delivery companies, e-commerce, restaurants. This is popular with micro-mobility. So meaning if there's, e-bikes, scooters, this kind of thing, they have all these huge city-based launches. So what might work in New York City or Los Angeles might not work in Paris or London or Berlin. And you need different go-to-market strategies, different branding, marketing campaigns. And so how does this split up between cities? So that's kind of the next arena for brand tracking and brand performance.
On your bio sheet that we get before the interview, there's a couple of suggested topics, and one of them is mental health marketing. I was wondering if you could kind of break that. How would this work in that application?
Yeah, so it's really cool. We actually did a webinar about this, it's 6 months ago, but it's such a relevant topic. In the past 2 to 3 years, I can't even believe that we're saying that at this point, but everybody, locked in their homes, COVID times, mental health became the number one topic with people, not only for their own selves, but for their, work situations, work-life balance, how are they dealing with their children, their families. And even now you see articles all over the place. Employers are trying to push people back to work, and people have their hands raised and say, actually, we want a certain amount of balance. What the pandemic era has taught consumers is it's shifted their focus. It's no longer just about fastest delivery or the cheapest price. They are really aligning their consumer and purchasing power with the values that a company has and how these companies connect branding and marketing wise with them. Mental health wise, I'll give you some examples. Maltese, which is a candy brand out of the UK, they actually did some campaigns about postpartum depression, of all things. And this is more of the user generated content, real people, real stories, talking about these everyday issues. There was another one, a beauty company, talking about 13 to 15-year-old girls and how they were really struggling with identity issues, and what all the magazines and social media, put out there as far as beauty standards. And by connecting with consumers with real stories, they were able to get better brand perception, better brand awareness. And of course that turned in, to more sales. So what the mental health marketing has done has totally shifted, the way marketing and branding leaders look at something. It used to be, even 5 years ago, we have the best product, isn't our brand so glitzy, get the celebrity, to do the endorsement. That is completely shifted now. People want to see real people, real stories. What's the connection? And so it's one of the shifts that we're going to continue to see.
Yeah, I think that's right. And you guys are uniquely positioned too, in that, Calm and Headspace either are or have been customers. And for people who don't know what those are, they're maybe two of the highest rated or the most popular sort of meditation apps out there. But that sort of thing really started to take shape, post COVID, as people were trying to figure out how to deal with their, mental health situations and things like that. And actually during COVID, we did a 10-part mini series on the isolationism and mental health issues and things like that, for this reason, right? Because especially in the remote work community, that was becoming prevalent, especially in Europe. Part of our team is in Barcelona, and those guys live in apartments as big as this room. And it's like, we've got a 1/4 acre, we got to go spread out in the backyard and get some sun or whatever, but those guys, they live outside and we're asked to stay inside. And so we were noticing a big uptick in mental health issues with our European counterparts, especially. And I think, as time went on, you started seeing more and more of that here in the States. So I think that that's really, good insight. And like I say, you guys are sort of uniquely qualified to talk about it. So I want to shift our conversation a little bit and talk about just sort of, I guess, the life of a startup, right? A lot of our audiences are CEOs, small business owners, startup founders, people like that. And you've been with Latana a little more than, well, almost 3 years, coming up on 3 years. And if we don't talk again, happy work anniversary.
Thank you.
One of the things that's happened, at least recently, is the Series B fundraise that you guys did. And I don't know what your tenure with the company has been, like if you were in on Series A and things like that, but I wonder if you could just sort of talk about the cycles or I guess, what a startup goes through, in those cycles of fundraising and things like that, just to sort of help, maybe people who are on the up and come, how they might sort of navigate those waters a little bit.
Sure. So usually you start out with a one founder, or now there's a history of doing co-founders. So 2 people, or you got 3 or 4. Either way, you have your founding team. They come together. Usually they get what's called either seed investment or angel investment. Usually angel investors come in and give small amount of money. It's usually in exchange for larger upswing, and they get a larger piece of the pie on the capitalization table. After that, you get your seed investment. That's enough to actually start running the company. And usually you're getting your first 10, 20, possibly people. At that point, you start with Series A. Series A is all about making sure that you have product market fit. And so this is where you start to see a lot of the startups pop up in the news. When they're at the angel investment level or the seed level, most people have never heard of them. Series A is where people start to know their names. They're getting the product market fit down. What's really nice is after you get the product market fit down, you get into Series B. Series B means that you have product market fit and now you're ready to scale. This is where it gets fun and where it gets exciting, and where you start to usually grow countries. You start to put in a fully fledged, leadership team. You really start to expand the product. And I think you brought up product-led growth a little while back. You start to make decisions if you want product-led growth or if you want sales-led growth, et cetera. But then it starts to get usually really big. Series B is usually anywhere between the 75 to 150 people or so. Then you go on Series C. That is just, it's more and more and more. And it really depends on, what the founders want to do and what their exit strategy is. Sometimes it's to be acquired. Sometimes it's to merge with another company. You hear a lot of, the glory stories in the news of different companies going to IPO. Usually they get to Series D, E, and it's pretty obvious that they're on the IPO track at that point. But the history really is usually it's either one or a couple of people in a room deciding that there is a need in the market that they need to fill, or they have a great idea that they think is going to play well. Then they usually try to get angel investment. They get a little bit of starting money. Seed investment, same thing. Then they will start with the Series A, get the product market fit down, all of that going, grow it to Series B, start scaling up, and then you really get going on the journey. But it is, I would say, amazing and chaotic at the same time.
Well, and I'm curious, like in your guys' situation, so you, it's in the news, you guys raised 36 million euros in your Series B. And I wonder, like for you guys, was it kind of, I guess, almost cyclical in the sense that you guys, not only give people brand insights and everything, but you do help people value their brands. Were you able to use your own technology to sort of come up with the valuation for your business? So as you went into Series B,
no. Nice question, but the answer is no. One of the things I do want to do on the side is I would love to have, a set of users that we can always go to for our own brand awareness, because we want to be users of our own product. But for us, it was really about having enough of a product market fit and enough capacity for us to scale. That's what really Series B is about. Can you take it to the next level? Most people, if you ask them to produce, I'll take it on the consumer side. If you ask them to produce one iPhone, they could probably figure it out. If you ask them to produce 1 million and produce 1 million every month, that becomes a problem. So this is kind of where the Series B goes. But for us, it was just saying, hey, we have a great product. It serves a really great problem, in the space. Brand is kind of the last forage of the marketing arena. What's the value of your brand? A lot of companies, have decided to sign on with Latana because they see the value. They understand it solves a key problem that they have. And the stickiness over time of our product, that's the really nice thing about brand tracking. It only becomes more valuable over time. You can see every month, every quarter, if you do it twice a year, but you're going to be seeing that over time, the value. So All of these things put together is how we landed our Series B, and we're super proud of it because in this economic climate as well, it's been so much more difficult for startups to get, capital.
Yeah. No, I imagine, yeah, especially just sort of economically the world we live in right now. I mean, I suppose there are people looking for opportunities, but the surefire thing that seemed to be the experience of the pre-COVID world is probably less common. So that makes a lot of sense. Can you talk about some of the sort of the metrics, I guess? So you're talking a lot about, product market fit and that sort of thing. Like, what kinds of metrics are you looking at to determine that? I mean, it can't just be, traffic to the website, right? I mean, are there some specific metrics that you guys are calling out or that you're presenting to a potential investor, when it comes time?
Sure. So I'll go over the basic ones, which are the pretty obvious one, revenue, new amount of customers. We have net revenue retention. This basically talks about how many people stay with us. You have LTV, lifetime value over time. You have CAC, our customer acquisition cost. You have CAC to LTV. You have CAC payback. But these are all of the core KPIs that you look at as a business. And then Series B is all about, do you have enough of these KPIs in place for an investor to come in and say, okay, you've got the product market fit, your KPIs look not only stable, but it looks like if you get this infusion of however many euros, dollars, whatever currency, that you're going to be able to take it to the next level. So basically, do these KPIs show enough of a positive trajectory that it will only increase? Or are the KPIs, wobbly, and we're not sure? So this is really, what the Series B investment's all about.
Okay, that makes sense. And then just sort of, I guess, one more thing on that is, so I guess, what is it the money is for in the situation of scaling your business, right? I mean, do you guys have the type of business that it's really just about scaling out manpower? You get more people doing the same tasks and it continues to grow, that kind of thing? Or like when you're going to an investor and you're trying to, I guess, talk them into investing with your company, where is the investor seeing the, the bit of your business that makes them go, okay, I'm going to get a good return on this. It's worth me putting money in.
Yeah, and everybody asked us this question after we announced our Series B. So the first thing is into our R&D and our product. We want to be able to fully flesh out our product. Right now, we're only on our version 2 of our product in our dashboard. If you go to our website, you can see a really nice little animation of it. It needs to be bigger, better, faster, more insights, more API integrations. So this is the very first thing. We also want to scale out our marketing and sales teams, and we also want to hire in even a more well-rounded leadership team. So it's not just about adding more bodies to do the same thing. It's about growing the scope of the offering. So think about when Tesla first came out and it was just the first car. And now Elon Musk, he's, talking about putting chips in people's brains. He's talking about, solar panels that you can put on your house, that help you generate your own electricity. So it's really about expanding the product set.
Okay. What kind of integrations can you pull from the API? That's kind of I'm in software. So
what we want to do, it's a good question. When we started with our V1, we just had an export function, CSV export, because what we found is if customers, usually they'll do one or two things. Number one, they'll take a picture of our dashboard and they'll put that in their presentations. It's a very easy to use, customizable dashboard. However, if they didn't want to do that, that usually means that they have a set of tools in-house that they currently use. So I don't know if they're visualizing things in Tableau, whatever it is that they're doing, their own BI system. Usually they want the CSV export. What we want to do in the next stage, though, is we want to integrate it with Google Analytics. We want to integrate it with marketing automation software like Marketo, Pardot, all of these different things. We want to integrate it with social media campaigns. So you can see, we ran this campaign. Look, here's a spike. Oh my gosh, here's a target audience. Look, the perception, here are the associations. You can start to see all this. Our goal within the next 5 years is to really become the Google Analytics of brand tracking and brand performance.
Nice.
I love that.
Like that.
One of the things you talked about, and I had it on my list here, but one of the things you mentioned was fleshing out, or part of this fundraise is fleshing out a bigger and broader leadership team, or maybe a more robust leadership team. And I wanted to talk to you just because of your tenure with this company and also with working in other startup environments. Right now, or at least as it was given to us, your titles are currently CMO and CGO. And for people who aren't in the startup realm, I mean, obviously in those early days, when you've got a small founding team and maybe a few helpers or whatever, like people are wearing a lot of hats. And this feels like this could be sort of an extension of those, or maybe it just plays to your strengths. So maybe that's why you have sort of this dual title thing. But I wondered if you couldn't talk about just sort of the way that your position has evolved, where you sort of, came in almost 3 years ago with this company, in whatever role you were in at the time, and how that sort of evolved to where we are presently. Just, as the business grows and as the business scales, you're certainly not shedding responsibilities, but like, how does that role evolve? Like the CMO of a company that's still living off seed money versus the CMO of a company that's a Series B.
Sure. When I came into the company nearly 3 years ago, there was 2 marketing people, 2. So coming in, we had an old brand. This was super legacy. It was bright yellow. So if you go to Google, you type in Latana brand tracking, Google Images, you might be able to see it. I think somebody liked Pink Floyd. I think you might have that in your background as well, because it kind of looks like so you'll have some fun in Google Images looking at that. But the thing is if you put the bright yellow into a dashboard, your eyes are just going to go crazy, staring at that for longer than 5 seconds. So we really had to come in and redo the brand, and we just had 2 people doing it. So that's where we started. Where it ended up today is I manage marketing, manage all of sales, been managing customer success, and also taking on, different tasks related to the operations of the company. So this is where you have this dual title. And in the startup world, it really means the person that does everything.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I thought it was interesting too, because it's almost, the like CMO and CGO are kind of the same thing, right? I mean, ultimately, your position in marketing is to grow the company, and your position as a growth officer is to grow the company. And so, but I guess probably there's some tactical differences, but I think it's really interesting how, you're almost evolving the position, right? From like what used to be a traditional CMO, which was just a guy that could do marketing or, understood, how to read analytics or something, now you've got these people, like yourself, who have this breadth of experience that cover all these different things. And there's almost not just a name for you yet, and so, but, for raising money and things like that, we have to call ourselves something, but, and so I just wondered, how has that position evolved in your experience as a CMO, just in these last, either these last 3 years or in the, from the first time you were doing something similar?
Sure. So I would say very particular to the startup and the technology community, there's these new titles popping up. So definitely the CGO, the growth officer title, also the CRO, the chief revenue officer title. Traditionally, chief revenue officer used to be more of a sales track and sales based. It would be somebody that came from the sales arena and that's all they did, grow sales teams, and boom, now they're the chief revenue officer. What we're finding is now marketing leaders are starting to move into that CRO role, because companies are looking for someone not that can just sell, but that can create demand and sell. And so you're starting to see, that happen as well. It's interesting. If we talk another 2 years, there's going to be new titles. Yeah. It's the one thing in the technology industry, they'll create a title. But the idea is who manages the growth, who manages the revenue, who's responsible for operating. Those things are never going to change.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting, the way that you just described how the marketing people have moved into the CRO position is almost like, I think, what we're talking about, the CMO moving into CGO position, right? It's kind of this evolution of that.
Exactly.
It's funny, we have a guest coming on in a few weeks that has like 4 different CMOs who did like all of them different little acronyms of things, and I look at them, I can't even tell what they are. I'm gonna have to get clarification on like 3 of them. But I kind of want to jump back into the product and how it can be used on a rebrand. Say for example, a company goes down the new Coke road and they start getting this feedback. Once they get the feedback, do you guys help them do the rebrand based on that feedback, or do you say, hey, here's what we learned, go have fun?
I wish we were the people that helped them do the rebrand. I would be an even more busy person than I already am doing rebrands for all these companies. But no, our job is to really provide the insights and help them use those insights to make actionable decisions. So an example of that is we had a very well-known flower company from the United States. There's not many there, but a very well-known flower company that has multiple business lines with multiple business names come to us and say, we want to rebrand and we want to consolidate all these brands into one. Can you help us with the insights on our target audiences, which are different for these different brands, and what would be really the best way to consolidate this into one? So not every rebrand is one product. Sometimes it's multiple product lines. Another example, this particular company didn't come to us, but it's still a good example. Procter & Gamble. It's one of those businesses that owns every single micro, kind of business line that you can ever imagine. Imagine if a company like that wanted to rebrand and they wanted to consolidate, 5 different business lines into one and create a mini brand. How would they do it? So this is really what we can help solve. We also have another use case. Let's say a company has done business for a certain amount of time and they had a product line they didn't do well and they wanted to kind of do a clean slate and start all over again. Rebranding after a situation like that as well, how do you do it? So specifically to rebrands, this is how we do. We also have a great guide. I will just put in that public service announcement on our website, The Ultimate Guide to Rebranding.
Nice.
Yeah, no, I think it's really cool. And again, it's these insights that I think you can pull out of it that, make all the difference when you're trying to do that stuff. And one of the things that you guys really push out there as one of your top things is just this idea of data reliability. I think for a long time, especially with Google Analytics and stuff like that, I mean, you're probably dependent on somebody setting up your Google Analytics platform. And so you're putting some trust in somebody that they're pulling in that data and actually doing something useful with it. And then you've got sort of the component of, are you reading it correctly? And are you interpreting what you're seeing the right way and things like that? But at the end of the day, I mean, you kind of don't know still, unless you're an expert in this space. And so I think one of the things that you guys do that's specifically, or, that's really interesting specifically, is that you fill in this gap, in the data through these more, and maybe it's more those more human-like questions and things like that we were talking about. But you're filling in the insights between those things. So, I mean, on your end, how do you guys, I guess, lead with something like reliable data? How do you sort of make the claim and back up the reliability of the data you're providing?
So we have a machine learning process in the background. So when you have data, you get what's called margins of error. You also get what's called outliers. So if you think of any graph, splatter plot point data graphs, you'll have things that are high and you'll have things that are low. So when it comes to data, we want to make sure to smooth that out. So all the data really consolidates into what we think is real world results. The worst thing that you can do, especially with consumer insights, is get a bunch of data back and the data is like, okay, well, this doesn't make sense because this is completely over here and this is here. Does this really match? A lot of companies, especially the longer they're in business, have enough data to understand within a margin of error what's meaningful and kind of what the history is of their consumer habits. So this is the thing that our machine learning really does. It smooths the data out. It makes sure that the margins of error are as low as possible. And it makes sure that the data really aligns with the real world results. And this becomes really apparent over time. A really nice example of this is, let's say it's a company in the United States. They do a Super Bowl campaign. They spend millions of dollars. They put something out there. And let's say they see no spike at all. Can that be true? So these are the types of questions, that we really aim to solve. And so by doing that, we give people the sense of confidence that this data is accurate, and you see it over time. And this is the thing that makes everything sticky with our product.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Well, and I wanted to ask too, just sort of about that AI component, right? Because I mean, it does seem like it's sort of the word of the day, right? We're moving into the word of the day being Web3, right? But there's kind of these catch-all buckets that everybody talks about, and AI is one of those things. So, I mean, so you would say that like the big differentiator with Latana is this, I guess, this machine learning or this AI. This thing basically lives on a layer above your data, and it's basically doing this sort of, I guess, data integrity scrub before it gets to us, right? So that's the role of AI in your system.
There's two roles of it. Number one is the processing of the data, which you just explained. The other one is our ability to locate the actual users that are taking the survey. In the old methodology, just like the focus group example, if you wanted every woman in New York City in a certain age group with a Chihuahua, you would have to get out there on the street. Hi, who are you? What's your age? Do you have a Chihuahua? That takes a ridiculously long amount of time, and you can't guarantee how many of those particular types of people you can get. With our AI, what we do is, because we do this survey taking all the time, we already know the population areas and who does what. And so our survey technology can automatically start to make propensity of how many people in a particular area. So this is how we can do it faster in a much more clear way.
Okay, so if I was using your platform, for example, is that, I guess, that sort of collective database of knowledge that lives within your AI, is that being applied to my reporting? So for example, if I'm trying to make an understanding of my reporting globally, right? Like whatever it is that we're searching for, trying to figure out, like, are you then able to apply this outside data that maybe wasn't part of our survey, but you know this about those users, for example? Like, are you able to make our reporting more robust by that?
That's the good question, because the answer is no, we don't do it now, but it's the good question because that's really one of the next arenas for our business and our product. We start out as brand tracking, brand performance, brand analytics. In future, because we continuously collect so much data, we can start to turn ourselves into a database. So think about all the companies that come to us. They're asking relatively similar questions. They have different businesses, they sell different things, but they're going to get, a man or a woman, certain different ages, different propensities to buy things. We're starting to collect huge amounts of data that in years future, we'll be able to position ourselves in a database. So I would say, let's talk again in a couple of years. You never know.
Well, yeah, because it seems like I would be able to come to you and basically say, okay, I'm trying to discover X, sort of to Mike's point earlier about maybe a new product launch, for example. I could come to you and say, okay, well, how do women in New York with Chihuahuas think about this relatively, right? Or generally speaking. And you could almost look in that data pool and probably make some assumptions. Maybe they're not perfect or whatever, but you could look and say, well, we've talked to, 50,000 people with Chihuahuas in the tri-state area, and they all think X about Y, something
Exactly.
like that. So it seems like there's a way to almost turn that data around, which could be really interesting.
Exactly. And the different thing is, right now with Google Analytics, you're putting out campaigns and you're getting things like click rates and open rates, and how many people responded to your performance marketing campaign. The difference with the data that we have is we've asked people. So it is much more accurate and precise information.
So say I go into the giant pet store here in the US, and we probably know who that is. They're everywhere. And I buy a specific brand of dog food that is known to be used for Chihuahuas. Usually when you go to check out, they're asking you for your phone number so they can gather your data and keep track of what you buy. And there's been like, I can't remember the book that it was out of, but there was an example of Target being able to determine that someone is pregnant and about to have a baby based on their shopping habits and based on what they've been purchasing over the last 6 months. And I'm wondering if, like, these giant pet stores or these giant companies give you access to their existing database to analyze that information to be able to make better decisions based off of the current data that they already have. Or are you going out and finding new data, new information? Because for me, if I was the giant pet store, obviously I'd want to use the existing data that I have and be able to pull from that. And I would assume that you would love to have that data. So how does that work between the companies? Do you get access to their database?
We haven't done that yet. And the reason for that, number one, is privacy issues. Because we're a company based in Europe, there's GDPR, so people have to opt in, which means they have to opt in for our purposes, not the pet store's purposes. So there's a couple of laws and privacy issues there. The other reason we haven't done it is because we ask questions about the perception of the brand.
Okay.
I think what you're talking about will come later. So if we have this podcast again in a few years, it will come later, because then once we start turning into the database, that's where what you just said will become extremely relevant, where we can start making connections with businesses in particular arenas and start collecting different data points. But you're definitely on the right track for the future of what this could become.
Love it.
Super cool. Well, Angeley, we're starting to get sort of near the end of this show. I wonder if you wouldn't take just a brief minute and let people know how they can either connect with you as an individual, if they'd like to learn maybe a little more about you, or have you on their own podcast, or if, and also just a little bit more about Latana, how we can get involved and use the platform, learn more of that kind of thing.
Sure. So if you want to connect with me, Angeley Mullins, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's the best way. Send me a ping, not a problem. Happy to talk to you about whatever you would like to talk about. If you'd like to learn more about Latana and brand tracking, go to latana.com. You can look at all the wonderful resources we have. Our content team, which is fabulous, puts out tons of guides and reports. There's a guide to brand tracking, guide to rebranding, all kinds of different marketing techniques. We have white papers, and we also do really nice little dives. We call them brand bites. They're little deep dives into brand awareness on the best and most well-known companies out there. And we cover probably the world's largest amount of industries and different brands. So I'll leave that as the teaser for you to go on the site and take a look.
I love that. And I would just sort of add to that. I mean, in doing research for this conversation, I mean, like, yes, your website is robust. Like, it's hard to believe how deep it is, because there really is a lot of information. And, you know, obviously these top level reports, I mean, they're all brands people will know. And, you know, so there's a cool way to gain some insight to, you know, what these big companies are doing, you know, whether that relates to your business or something else. But there's you know, just a treasure trove of information in there. So it's a really interesting. And I read a few articles last night. They're very well written, great pieces.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I guess then, if that's everything, we'll call it a wrap. But thanks so much for coming on, Angeley. This has been awesome.
Yeah, really thanks for having me. Great discussion.
Absolutely. And we'll do it again in a few years when you guys are on to Series D, E, whatever. And you've got some new insights to share. I'm looking forward to it. So cool. So thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. And we'll see you guys next.